Some teams really took their chance to climb the table this weekend, others not so much. My name's Mark, let's talk rugby. We had some big results this weekend that have had a massive effect on where teams are potentially going to finish, for home draws, etc., or even just making the top 8 as well. And table has been turned upside down a little bit, in that kind of race to the 8 as well. So really interesting times. Only 2 rounds left now, and as usual, we're going to go down through the results from the weekend, not spend too much time on any one game, and we'll then have a look at the table and see where teams are left with, as I said, only 2 rounds to go. So the first one we have is Cardiff Rugby 24, Ospreys 21. So tons of cards in this one. We have yellow for Liam Belcher after 7 minutes. Ospreys can't take advantage of that. Then we have Callum Sheedy scores a penalty, finally puts Cardiff ahead. A minute later, Kasende gets a red card for Ospreys, so they're down to 14. During that period then, Rory Thornton goes over to score, and Owen Watkins gets sent to the bin, so Ospreys down to 13 at that point. And you think, Cardiff, great chance for them now to potentially build on that momentum and have 10-point lead, put themselves maybe out of sight before Ospreys get back up to numbers, but doesn't happen for them. We then have, just before halftime, Kieran Williams goes in for a try for Ospreys, converted, brings it back within 3 points at the break. Into the second half then, Belcher gets in for a try pretty early in the half for Cardiff. Dan Edwards goes to the bin, after they scored a try as well. And again, thinking Cardiff, got themselves back that 10-point lead. Can they score some points during the yellow card period this time? Dan Thomas gets in right at the end of the yellow card for their third try. Callum Sheedy converts. So at that point then, they're winning, 24-7, and looks like game is maybe settled at that point, or they've got a certainly game-winning lead with only 20 minutes to go. I'm thinking, can Cardiff get that 4th try and get themselves a bonus point as well? That would be hugely helpful for their push to, not just stay in the top 8, but finish, well up the table as well. That doesn't happen though. We end up with Jack Walsh goes in with about 10 minutes to go for a try for Ospreys. Then about 5 minutes later, Josh McNally goes to the bin for Cardiff. So now they've got 2 yellow cards, or had 2 yellow cards in the game. And then just after that, Dan Edwards in for Ospreys' 3rd try, converts his own try as well. So brings Ospreys back within 3 points. And no further scores from either team. Ospreys can't get an extra score to win the game, and as I said, Cardiff can't go on and get that bonus point try either. But crucially for them, they do get to win. Cardiff Rugby 24, Ospreys 21, the final score. So the next Friday night game then we have is Edinburgh Rugby 33, Hollywoodbets Sharks 28. So this one, a bit of a ding-dong battle here. We had 5 tries from Edinburgh, 4 from the Sharks, and Sharks take lead. Edwin van der Merwe goes over after 6 minutes, converted by Jean Smith. Ewan Ashman then 10 minutes later in for Edinburgh, and Cammy Scott converts that to get them back level. Then Manu Chituka gets in for the Sharks. Smith converts again, so now the Sharks are leading. And then about 5 minutes to go to halftime or so, Glenn Young in for Edinburgh, and converted by Scott. So we're tied up at the break. Into the second half then, and it's the Sharks who hit the front again. Vincent Koch in for a try again, converted. And, the 7-point lead with just over 20 minutes to go. But then Tuipulotu gets in for an Edinburgh try. Conversions missed, so they're still 2 points behind. But then 3 minutes after that, Patterson in for Edinburgh's fourth try of the game. So they've got a bonus point wherever else happens. Ross Thompson converts as well. So now they've got a 5-point lead. And then a few minutes after that, again, real momentum with Edinburgh as Darcy Graham goes in for their fifth try. Ross Thompson converts that. So going into the last 10 minutes, they're leading 33-21. I think at that point you're thinking, okay, should be a win for them. And it's only at the death, really, the clock in the red. Vincent Chituka in, or I think it was like the last minute. Vincent Chituka in for the Sharks, bonus point try. That's converted. Gets them losing bonus point, but they, even though it was only 5 points between the team, Edinburgh knew the game was won at that point anyway. So Edinburgh 33, Hollywoodbets Sharks 28, the final score, and that result officially ended the Sharks' hopes of reaching the playoffs, and the same with the Cardiff Ospreys one as well. Ospreys losing that officially ruled them out of the race to the 8, but we talked about in the preview where you may as well have ruled both teams out already anyway. Right, so the final then Friday night game, Zebre Parma 18, Dragons RFC 19. So this was, I didn't watch this game, but it was fairly exciting just in terms of the way the game finished and the fact that, it's 15th versus 16th in the table, and both teams have been performing maybe a little bit above where their baseline is during the season, not necessarily getting results all too often, but you felt like it wasn't just going to be a basement dweller kind of state affair with this one, and it proved to be, I think, a pretty decent game. So Zebre obviously looking to try and keep that scoreboard ticking over. They opened the scoring with a DeRay penalty. Then we have the reply from Jared Rosser for Dragons. He goes in for a try. Angus O'Brien converts that. So they're leading at halftime 7-3. Into the second half then, and Di Bartolomeo gets in for Zebre's first try, and at the same time Douglas goes to the bin for Dragons. But as we've seen a lot this weekend, Zebre not able to extend their lead during that yellow card period. We then have just the end of the yellow card period, I think they get a penalty, and DeRay pops that over for them. So they've got a narrow lead, and 10 minutes or just over 10 minutes to go. Ben Carter in for a Dragons try, and that's converted as well by Angus O'Brien. So at that point then, I think the score is 12-11 to the Dragons. But just after the restart, Locatelli gets in for Zebre for what looked like maybe the winning score from him. Conversions missed though, so Dragons are still within losing bonus point territory. At that time it's 18-12, 10 minutes to go. Then Dragons at the end, they are really pressing for a final score. They've gone well into clock into the red, 3 minutes over, and finally Dan Richards gets that reward for the patience that they showed. Really, it's really difficult, once the clock goes in the red, one mistake and things are done for you. And Zebre being careful, obviously not going to see the penalty as well, but Dragons, they get themselves over through Richards. Conversion is missed, but it's enough to give them the win by a point. So, a decent game between these two. And even though it is, again, 15 versus 16, I think given recent performances from both teams and some of the exploits that they've had in Europe as well this year, I think we can look at both teams in a slightly different light, and hopefully next season we're going to see both teams, more in the mix with the other teams as well. But Zebre Parma 18, Dragons RFC 19, the final score in that one. So then we're on to the Saturday games. First we have here top of the table clash. Before this game, DHL Stromers second in the league, Glasgow top of the table, and by the end they actually swapped positions. So DHL Stromers 48, Glasgow 12, and Glasgow really a disastrous tour to South Africa. It's akin to, we've seen Leinster do something similar, because they've had a lot of their tours around this period of the season where they're trying to keep players fresh, and they were sending weakened teams down and get absolutely hockeyed. They did the same at the start of the season, in fairness, and got hockeyed by the Stormers as well, 35-0. But yeah, this time of the year, you really don't want to be losing momentum, or as well, providing momentum to one of your main opponents as well for the title, and that's pretty much what they did. Stormers, they scored 6 tries to just 2 from Glasgow. So start off, really good start from the Stormers. Feinberg and Gamazulu scores a penalty. A few minutes later, then Makunu goes in for his first try. He gets a second try then just 5 minutes after that. So Stormers completely in control of the game. Jack Dempsey goes to the bin at that point as well. But again, during that period, not adding any extra scores, and once Glasgow are back to 15, it's actually them to score almost straight away. Ollie Smith gets in for a try for them, but Stormers, they just keep responding. So a couple minutes after that, Evan Roos goes in for their third try, and at the break, it's looking like they've got a decent lead. They do have a problem though, because Reinhardt has gone to the bin just before half time. And we get into, just before we go in, Hiddleston goes in for a try. I didn't see it, but I'm almost certain it's going to be on the back of a dominant maul from Glasgow. Hastings converts that, and suddenly Glasgow, back within touching distance a little bit, and you're thinking get a decent start to the second half, and it really could, maybe not be a catalyst for a win, but certainly, if they can add a couple of tries in the second half, maybe finish within 5 points, it wouldn't be a complete disaster of a South African tour. But we go into the second half within a few minutes. Feinberg and Gamazulu stretches the lead from the tee. Then Adam Hastings goes to the bin a couple minutes after that. A few minutes more, and Ruan Nell is in for the bonus point try for Stormers, and they've completely taken control of the contest again. They don't add any more scores until the final 10 minutes, where we have Feinberg and Gamazulu and then Marabe both going in for tries in the last kind of 8 or 9 minutes of the contest. And apart from that kind of little purple patch that Glasgow had, before half time, couldn't really do anything other than that. And it is very disappointing South African tour for them, and producing some of your worst performances of the season a couple of rounds before we go into the knockout stages is not where any team wants to be. So Glasgow, they've got 2 rounds now. They're going to be obviously back in Europe. They've got 2 rounds to kind of steady the ship, get a bit of confidence back, and go into the knockout stages. Obviously they want to try and retake first position, but if they can't do that, they've got to find some way of kind of getting back to that level that they were at for much of the season. But talking about a team who were at a level and dropped away, Stromers, they had that massive unbeaten run at the start of the season, completely fell away, but now they're coming back at the right time, the right part of the season. So DHL Stromers 48, Glasgow Warriors 12, the final score in that one. Next then we have Fidelity Secure Drive Lions versus Connacht. So Lions 33, Connacht 21, the final score. But this was a fairly easy win for the Lions, and Connacht making the score look a little bit better in the last couple of minutes of the game. So in the first half, we had 3 tries from the Lions. So first of all, Angelo Davids, then Van Vick, and Mahashe, and then into the second half, within 4 minutes, Cronia is over for the bonus point try. Then Kutsia goes to the bin, and Matthew Devine goes in for Connacht's first try. But then we fast forward 10 minutes to go. Lions game is pretty much won. They're leading 28-7 at that point, and there's no sign of any kind of comeback from Connacht. And then Van Vick goes in for his second of the game and makes it 33-7. And then the last 3 or 4 minutes of the game, Devine gets a second and Paul Boyle gets a third try for Connacht. But again, no real threat in terms of either getting losing bonus point, get a try bonus point, or not even an outside chance of winning the game really at that point. The Lions we talked about before, home form has been absolutely massive for them, and performances in South Africa against other South African teams, and now I think they've really set themselves up well, that even if they're obviously going to have to go to Europe now, that even with that, they can still probably have enough points total to stay in that top 8. Obviously, everyone wants to finish as high up the table as they can, and you feel it if the Lions really want to go deep into the playoffs, that they will have to start performing better on the road as well. But that's that's a worry for another day, really. Brilliant performance from them. We're finally seeing, what this Lions team is made of, because they have been the forgotten South African team, really. If you look at, the last few seasons, we've, Stormers and Bulls have always been up there. Sharks have won a European trophy, haven't really delivered in the league, but the Lions haven't delivered on any fronts up until now. So it's great to see that happening for them. Not so great as an Irish fan to see it happen against an Irish team, but nobody can argue who deserved to win this game, and that was absolutely the Lions. So Lions 33, Connacht 21, the final score. Now, next then we have the Irish Derby, and Munster versus an Ulster team who completely decided to rest, pretty much all of their first team players for their upcoming European semi-final. And it looked like at the start that maybe it wasn't going to backfire on them the way maybe you would have predicted at before the game, because they started much the better of the two teams, and it was King goes in for a try for them. Well worked move in the corner. Got a full review of this on the channel, by the way, if you want more details on it. But yeah, they take the lead. And then Munster, for the first 20 odd minutes, it's all Ulster. And then Tom Brigg goes to the bin, and momentum just completely switches over to Munster with the extra man. One of the few teams, as we've seen in the other games, who actually took full advantage of an extra player. And John Hodnett goes in for a double during that yellow card period, and that puts Munster ahead. They're leading at the break. Then we go into the second half. Then Kendallin, who has had to come on had to come on for one of the backs. Was a Farrell, I think. Yeah, Farrell, I think, got injured, and Munster had run out of back substitutes by that stage, so he had to come in for him, and he gets himself a double then on 47 and 53 minutes, and that's then Munster have the bonus point. They're completely in control of the game by that point, at least on the scoreboard, because Ulster had a massive amount of possession and territory, but really lacked the cutting edge in attack. Then Hodnett goes in to complete his hat-trick on 55 minutes. We then have John Andrew getting a second try for Ulster today, but a little bit of a mini revival, but doesn't last for long. A couple minutes later, Hodnett goes in here for his fourth try of the game, and then a minute later, Kendallin completes his own hat trick to make a 7 tries for Munster, and it's not very often, a player gets a hat trick but isn't like the top try scorer in the game for their team. Like that's got to be crazy for him, especially coming off the bench and getting a hat trick as well. Really impressive for him. Impressive from Munster as well. They've now put 2 back-to-back really good performances together. And we talked about before this game where, the perception you had, Ulster and Munster kind of close in the table. The perception was that Ulster had a good season and Munster, not so much. And a lot of that was about the way that they, their exit in Europe, just completely abject, there. And the fact as well that they had that really good run at the start of the season and then completely fell away. And it's now, kind of similar to the year when they actually lifted the trophy. They're producing that momentum now going into the playoffs, and we talked about the fact that if Munster win this, then the conversation about which of these teams has actually had a good season and who hasn't can completely change. And I think that will now, because Ulster have basically banked on doing well in their semi-final and getting to a European final. And if that doesn't, work out for them, then, you got to ask question marks about, how they let themselves drop from being in the top 2-3 in the table not too long ago to, at the moment, barely making it into the top 8 as well. So, but Munster is, for them, they won't care about that, about that. They're on the up. And, people who have been kind of criticizing, who's it, Macmillan is there, right? Criticizing him and saying he's a poor appointment. Like I've said it before, you've got to give coaches, longer in the position before you start talking about stuff like that. We've had, we've seen with Connacht, Lancaster taking a while, and now, finally got them on a run and seems to be having an effect, but it took a while to get them there. Same with Ulster as well, with Murphy up there. It took him a while to get things going there as well. So, I don't know why kind of the daggers are out. And it wasn't as much from Munster fans, it was from, I think, other Irish fans there. And also the fact that Munster had that churn with coaches as well, which can't be good for any team. So hopefully Munster are kind of on the up now. This isn't just a little bit of a purple patch in them, that we see them, whatever happens to them in terms of, where they finish this season, that carries into next season. We see better performance from them in the URC and in, I would expect them at this point to be in the Champions Cup. But whether it's Champions Cup or Challenge Cup, that we see better European performances from them as well. But we certainly saw a good performance in this. So Munster 41, Ulster 14, the final score in that one. Now on to the next game, and that was Scarlets 21, Vodacom Bulls 23. So Scarlets coming so close to getting a win in this one, but they couldn't, just couldn't hold out. So we start off with Bulls start well. Just goes in after 3 minutes for a try from them. Pollard converts that. Then Scarlets reply. Callum Woolley gets in for a try, not converted, and the fact that Scarlets missed all of the conversions, certainly in the end turned out to be a bit of a deciding factor in the game. But I always say it doesn't matter. You can't kind of go back in time and say, well, if you had say converted 2 of the tries that they would have won, because it completely changes how the rest of the game plays out after that. So it's not something you can do. But Willie in for a try for them. Then James in on 20 minutes, not converted, but they do have a 3-point lead at that point. But 10 minutes to go to the break. Andre Pollard gets in for a try himself. He converts his own try as well. So the Bulls have the lead at the break. Into the second half then, and Stedman Gans goes to the bin for the Bulls. And during that yellow card period, Fletcher Anderson in for the Scarlets' third try of the game. And you're thinking, okay, maybe there's a chance here, because then Francois Klopper also goes to the bin after the try is scored because of infringement in the build-up. So they've got another 4 minutes against 13 players, and 6 minutes after that against 14. So you're thinking they should be able to extend, or score more. Like I think they had a 1-point lead at that point, and should be able to extend their lead during that period, but they're not able to, and it's actually the Bulls who win the second yellow card period, with Andre Pollard going in for, or not going in, popping over a penalty that put the Bulls just ahead. And after that, then we have kind of exchange of penalties in the last 20 minutes. So Joe Hawkins puts Scarlets back ahead from the tee. 6 minutes later, Pollard responds again. Then fast forward another 6 minutes, and Hawkins puts the Scarlets 21-20 ahead with 7 minutes to go. And then a minute or so to go in the game, Bulls get a penalty, upsets Pollard. The guy is so reliable, pops it over, and that was enough to win it for the Bulls. So Scarlets came close, but the Bulls, doing just enough to get the win. And at this point of the season, that's what you want. There's no point in producing an amazing performance and coming up short. If you can win these tight ones, it's it's great in terms of just momentum, but also it's great in terms of when you go into knockout rugby and there is a close game, you've got that in your back pocket, thinking, well, we did it not so long ago. We know how to navigate these kind of situations. So that's gonna, I think, really stand to them in a few weeks' time when we get to the playoffs. So Scarlets 21, Bulls 23, the final score. Okay, and then the final game of the weekend, also have a full review of this on the channel. Benetton 29, Leinster 26. So Benetton's final home game of the season against a Leinster team who had seemingly rediscovered some form recently, but that went completely out the window. And it wasn't a case of Leinster picked a weakened team. Like, there were players in there who maybe you don't see all that often, but you look at the lineup and there's so many first choice players. You got Dan Sheehan, Ty Furlong. He was injured, but still he was there for a while. Jack Conan, Josh Van der Fleer, Caelan Doris, Jameson Gibson Park, Harry Byrne, Jimmy O'Brien, Jamie Osborne, Rico Ioane, Tommy O'Brien, Kieran Frawley. Some of them are maybe bench players, or 23 or wider squad players, but that's a lot of talent that's there. And then coming off the bench as well, they had the likes of Sam Prendergast, Scott Penny, Alex Soroka, who's for me has been one of the best forwards in Leinster outside of the kind of the Ireland kind of back rowers. And then you had like Charlie Tector, who has been the form centre for Leinster this year. He's kind of been out for a while though, coming back in as well. So plenty of talent on there, but we didn't see plenty of performance, honestly. They did get themselves 4 tries in the game, but they never looked comfortable. Benetton opened the score, and really nice move to get Garbisi in. Alessandro Garbisi, that is, after 9 minutes. Leinster then reply. Conor Artiernig goes in for first try for Leinster for him. And then Josh Van der Fleer gets in for a try as well. Just before the break, Leinster then had another chance to get a third try before the break, but their line-out malfunctions. Into second half then, and Gibson Park gets in after it was Sheehan had broken the line, and he gets in to score a try, running a nice support line off that. And you're thinking at that point, okay, Leinster kind of taking control. No. A couple of minutes later, Mendy gets in for Benetton's second try. They then start piling on the pressure. And to go to the maul, Gasparini gets in for a try for them. Leinster then respond. Kieran Frawley gets in for their 4th try and their bonus point. Sam Prendergast on now. Actually, a nice conversion from him from out wide. That'll certainly help his confidence, I think. And at that point, you're thinking, okay, Leinster, can you close it out from here? No, they can't. So 10 minutes ago, Gasparini gets in for a try. Amaga converts it. So we're all tied up then at 26 points all. Leinster then clocking the red. A couple of minutes over the 80. They've been in their own half since before 80 minutes with the ball. They don't want to kick it away because they're trying to get something, spark something to get a win. They can't get over the halfway line though, and Benetton's defence starts pushing them back. Then they win a penalty, a dangerous clear out from Leinster, and Amaga pops the penalty over to win it for Benetton. Benetton, they've not been great shakes at all this season, but this was an absolutely deserved win for them. Leinster, certainly worrying signs for them. If this is the performance they're producing with so many stars in their lineup, at this point of the season. They've got the European semi-final coming up at the weekend, and then they've got the rest of the URC to go as well. And this is not kind of the momentum they would have want to have brought into that. So certainly a lot of work, I think, for Leinster to do, because they seem just really fragile this year. Kind of team where they seem to build up a little bit of confidence, but then kind of like eggshells, you just put that pressure on and it breaks down and they're just completely gone. That's what happened to them in this game, and they really need to kind of toughen up, but also get those systems working again. We saw them working the last kind of couple of weeks, but they kind of deserted them again in here. So Benetton 29, Leinster 26, the final score there. So those are results from the weekend. Now we'll have a look at the table and we'll see how, those have affected things overall. So first of all, new leaders. We got the DHL Stromers, top of the table on 56 points, having just beaten the Warriors. And because of the margin in that game as well, it means, it's very unlikely that Glasgow, the points difference, 164 to 114, Glasgow are not going to close that out in two rounds. So it means that Stormers effectively have an extra point because if Glasgow finish on the same amount of points to them, Stormers will be top of the league and number 1 seeds. So Glasgow 1 point behind at the minute, in second place on 55, and they'll be looking over the shoulder because they got now the Lions up to third place. Absolutely brilliant from them. As I said, absolutely delighted to see them up there. It's about time really that we've seen the Lions there, and hopefully the Lions fans, because I think they're kind of long suffering. Certainly in the URC era with the Lions, can enjoy this, no matter what happens to them for the rest of the season. But they're in third place on 53. Leinster then in fourth place on 53. And the fact that Leinster are behind on points difference again just speaks to the fact that Leinster's, especially their attack, has not been firing at all this season. The fact that they've only got like a 67% point or 67 point difference at this stage of the season just tells you, they've been scraping through games. They haven't had that kind of, what we've seen in the past, last 20 minutes, pull away, blow the score out. Hasn't been happening for them because the performances aren't there. The systems aren't there either, but they're in fourth place behind the Lions. Munster then in fifth place, looking far more secure, I think, at the minute on 51 points. And, I think you would say it at this point with 2 rounds to go, they got a 7-point lead over Connacht. They know they only need a couple of losing bonus points and they should, guarantee their spot in the top 8. But I think they're going to be in there anyway at this point. Cardiff then in 6th place on 50 points. That's brilliant to see because we've seen them last year where they just fell away after a really good start to the season. Looked like that was going to happen to them as well this year, but they've found some form at the right time of the season, kind of like Munster as well, and they're still in there. They've got a 6-point gap over Connacht, which basically means they know if they win one of their remaining 2 games that they're going to qualify for Champions Cup and the playoffs as well. So that's a great position for them to be in. They got a good young core, talented core of that team that would have got a lot of experience last year, and I think they're taking a step forward this year as well. So that's great to see. Then the Bulls, got their jersey on at the minute. I'm so glad also I got my Bulls jersey after so long wanted to get one. And luckily for me, they're rewarding me with their performances as well. Coming from pretty far down the table, they're now up to 7th place there, and obviously not guaranteed to be in the playoffs. There's still only 5 points between themselves and Connacht, but you'd rather be 5 points ahead, than 5 points behind at this time of the season. And they're above Ulster, a team who were up as high as 2nd at one point in the season. They've been in around the top 4 for most of the season as well. And, they're the team that you would really worry about in terms of losing out to Connacht for that final playoff spot. They do have way better points difference than Connacht, which means that, again, in a scenario where they both finish on the same amount of points, or match points that is, Ulster will qualify, so they know Connacht have to get at least 1 point ahead of them to knock them out. But you don't want to be the team that's fallen down to 8th in the table with 2 rounds to go. You're the one with the target on your back now. We're beginning to see a little bit of daylight, 2 points between themselves and the Bulls. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you've only got 2 rounds to go, if that is maintained after the next round, then just that little bit of safety for the Bulls, having one extra team below them, could be massive for them. Then we have Connacht in 9th place, so the only team outside of the top 8 who can who can qualify. There's no realistic or otherwise about it. They're the only team who mathematically can qualify now, other than the top 8 that are there. But you would imagine with a 3-point gap to Ulster, it probably means winning your last 2 games, and probably bonus points as well in there, at least 1 bonus point. So they've got to get probably 9 or 10 points in the last 2 rounds. And, that should give them a good chance to qualify, but it's still not going to be, I don't think it's going to be guaranteed for them to qualify as well. So it's not really in their hands, as it were, to do that. They're playing against Munster in the next round, and then they finish against Edinburgh. So even if they beat Munster, as said, Munster have a nice margin on them, so that you're not kind of, if they're playing Ulster and they'd beaten Ulster, let's say. Well, they did recently, obviously, to break their string in the Irish derbies. But if they were playing Ulster in that one and they beat them, they know that they would, move above them. But again, if they win those last 2 games, they still need a result to go for them. They need either, basically, even beating Munster, it's still not going to be enough. They need Munster to lose basically their last 2 games for them to catch them. They need, if that doesn't happen, they need to win the last 2 games. They need one of Ulster, Bulls, or Ulster or Bulls to lose at least 1 game of the last 2, and probably with Cardiff, because it's a 6-point gap for Cardiff to lose 2 games of the last 2. So still only 3-point gap to Ulster, but it does seem like a big task for Connacht. They've been on a nice run, but they've got to get that momentum back very quickly after that defeat to the Stromers. So, big task ahead for them. Then we get into the teams who can't qualify. So we got the Sharks in 10th place on 36. That loss, their loss this weekend, meant that obviously that they can't qualify. Same Ospreys in 11th on 35, losing to Cardiff means they were eliminated officially from the race to the 8. And then we get into the teams then who couldn't qualify anyway. I got Edinburgh, who beat the Sharks in 12th place on 33, and because of that win, potentially they could actually catch the Sharks and finish as high as 10th in the table. We have Benetton on the 13th after that win against Leinster. So kind of keeping pace there with Edinburgh with 33 points. Dragons then 14th with 25 points. And it's kind of lucky for them that, they got that win against Zebre, because Scarlets, although they didn't beat Scarlets are playing the Bulls, right? Yeah, they didn't beat the Bulls, but they did get themselves a losing bonus point in that game. But the Dragons win just enough to put themselves ahead. So that'd be a nice little kind of cameo, I think, for the last couple of rounds between the Dragons and Scarlets, who can finish higher in the table. Obviously, the Dragons are kind of used to filling one of the last 2 spots in the table. So finishing even 14th, I think, would certainly show progress from them. Scarlets, potentially they're going to go from qualifying for the Champions Cup last year to potentially finish second last in the table. Would be a real kind of come down for them. And given the whole turmoil in the Welsh game as well, it's not a good look, I think, for them. But, we've seen in recent, though, showing a bit more grit on stuff. And, that can be something certain to build on for next year. Zebre then 15th in the table, almost beat the Dragons. If they had beaten the Dragons, it would have been kind of a shootout between the two of them for who finished 15th and 16th. Zebre potentially could have avoided finishing bottom of the table. Mathematically, they still can because they're only 9 points behind Scarlets, but we got to be realistic. They're now going to finish bottom of the table, and for them, what it's about now is, can you get a third win this season? Because we talked about it so many times. They won the first 2 games of the season, and that was a brilliant achievement for them. The fact winning 2 games on the bounce in this competition, but they would not have thought that after that they would lose 14 on the bounce. And it's looking like maybe it's going to be 16 on the bounce in the last 2 rounds. So for them, it's all just about try and get that final win. But now that, a lot of these teams in kind of the top 8 are pretty sure of, again, I think you look maybe from Bulls, that kind of Bulls, Ulster, Connacht are maybe a little more unsure. Cardiff may be in there as well, but certainly the top 5, I think they, some of them are obviously mathematically qualified already. But I think for those top 5, it's going to be about jostling for position. And we've seen the table, the order of the table change so much this weekend. But I think in the last 2 rounds, we're going to see it kind of getting shuffled again. And it's going to be interesting to see, who's actually going to be filling those top 4 spots when we come to the end of round 18.